All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're talking about a pretty wild idea that sits right at the intersection of, ancient mysticism and the super strange world of quantum physics. We are looking at a theory where lucid dreaming isn't just something in your head, it's part of a fractal loop that starts all the way down at the atomic level.
So, what we're digging into today comes from a paper that proposes something, well, it's pretty out there. The core idea is that ancient maps of consciousness and modern quantum tech might actually be describing the exact same thing, just using totally different languages. It's like building a bridge between two worlds that couldn't possibly seem farther apart.
So let's just start with the main question, the one that this whole paper is built around. What if that state of clear light that a Tibetan monk talks about and the spin coherence a physicist measures in a lab, what if they're actually pointing to the exact same underlying reality? It's a huge thought, and it's really the engine driving this entire theory.
And you can really see this clash of worlds right here. On one side, you have these beautiful poetic metaphors from traditions like Kabbalah and Tibetan Buddhism, the garment of the soul, clear light. And on the other side, you've got the super precise language of quantum tech, things like atomic spins or biocooling or modulating photons. The really radical claim here is that these aren't just kind of similar ideas, they are direct one-to-one translations of each other.
Okay, so how in the world do you connect these two things? Well, the paper introduces this theoretical concept that acts as the bridge, and it's called QDI, which is short for quantum dream technology. This is where we go from pure philosophy into, well, applied physics. So here's the key thing to get. QDI is this proposed technology that could, in theory, just nudge your brain toward becoming lucid in a dream. It imagines using really gentle cooling and pulses of light to influence these tiny quantum processes, specifically the spin of electrons in certain proteins that are already happening in our brains. The idea is that this could make it just a little bit easier to have that aha moment and realize you're dreaming.
This table really lays out the core argument. The paper says these concepts are structurally isomorphic, which is just a fancy way of saying they share the same underlying structure, like a blueprint. So for example, the Tibetan concept of clear light, that moment of pure, unfiltered awareness, they map that directly to atomic spin coherence, which is a state of perfect quantum order. And the Kabbalistic idea of a protective garment of the soul, they think that's basically a description of the insulating effect of biocooling. See, every ancient idea lines up with a specific layer of the tech.
So let's look at how this all fits together into an actual working model. Because the theory isn't just matching up words, it's proposing a dynamic process, and it treats consciousness itself as this kind of fractal feedback loop. So what does that even mean? Well, a fractal is just a pattern that repeats itself at different sizes, right? The idea here is that the very same feedback process is happening at the quantum level with atoms, at the biological level with our neurons, and at the cognitive level with our thoughts. They're all nested inside each other, constantly influencing one another.
So here's how the loop works. It all starts with these tiny quantum effects at the atomic level. This then influences light particles, or photons, which in turn can be tweaked or modulated by technology. And finally, all of this gets integrated into our conscious awareness, which then feeds back to influence the atomic level again, starting the whole cycle over. It's this continuous loop from mind to matter and right back again.
Now look, this is a fascinating theory, for sure. But is it actual science? A theory is only really as good as your ability to test it. And that's exactly what this paper proposes, a huge, concrete, large-scale experiment to see if any of this is actually real. They call it the Global Link Protocol, and the plan is ambitious, to say the least. The idea is to get 100 highly trained meditators spread across 3 different continents to all sleep at the same time while wearing one of these theoretical QDI headbands. And the goal isn't just to see if they can share dream content, it's to see if they can achieve measurable physical synchrony in their brainwaves, and maybe even at the quantum level. And this isn't just some vague, wishful thinking experiment. The proposal is designed with serious scientific rigor. They have pre-registered, measurable targets for what counts as success. They know exactly what they're looking for in the physics data, in the neuroscience data, and even in the dream reports themselves. There's no moving the goalposts here. So just let the scale of this sink in for a second. 100 highly trained participants, all coordinated across 3 continents, sleeping and dreaming in sync. And they're all aiming for this incredibly precise physical target, a state of spin coherence that lasts for at least 30 microseconds. I mean, that is a tiny, tiny fraction of a second, but it could be just long enough to actually change the course of a dream.
Of course, anytime you're talking about a technology that could influence someone's dream state, the ethical questions are just massive. And the paper actually addresses this head-on by trying to build an ethical framework for doing this kind of responsible research into consciousness itself.
Their number one principle is what they call continuity. And this is so important. This isn't about just taking ancient wisdom and using it for tech. It's about collaboration, about working directly with the people who hold these traditions to co-design the experiments with respect.
And beyond that, the guardrails are really clear. Participants have full autonomy and control. They even have an emergency kill switch. There are strict protocols in place to prevent cultural appropriation. And most importantly, safety is first. The physical forces they're talking about are designed to be within the same range as the Earth's own natural magnetic field.
So, where does all of this leave us? What are the big implications of trying to build a quantum bridge into our own dreams? Let's take a step back and look at the potential future this kind of research is trying to map out.
Maybe the biggest takeaway is that this theory gives us a whole new lens to look at history through. It suggests that when these ancient texts talk about a light body or a garment of the soul, maybe they weren't just being poetic. Maybe they were giving the most accurate scientific report they possibly could of a real biological feedback process happening across multiple scales. And from a scientific point of view, the experiment it's beautifully designed because it's a win-win. If it works, it could totally revolutionize contemplative science, giving us objective tools to study these incredibly subjective states. But here's the thing, even if it fails, it's still a win. A failure would help us draw a much clearer line between the quantum world and the world of the mind. Either way, we learn something profound. Which brings us to this final, really fascinating question. Is this whole project just rediscovering the quantum physics behind an ancient map of consciousness that we've had all along? Or is it something else entirely, the first step in drawing a brand new map for the future of the human mind? The answer, I guess, is waiting for us, somewhere in that space between a dream and an atom.